Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and yes, we are doing yet another JackRabbit podcast, so half of you will immediately disappear, but for those of you who do love the show, thank you ever so much for coming yet again. And today we've got a really fun video planned in the advent of the recent Doctor's announcement and the the preparation for RTD's return. We have decided to do our favourite Doctors from worst to best ranked. I am joined here with my very good friend Lee, aka Problembeing.
Oh, good to be here.
This way.
I don't know. What do you want from me?
Never mind.
Yeah.
We've each written down our own unique lists, and we are going to, just kind of talk about the reasons why they're positioned where they are, and we'll probably get in some arguments, but that's the fun of doing this. So, we're going to let Lee go first. So, Lee, coming in at the very, very bottom for you, take it away.
Yeah. Jodie Whittaker. It's self-explanatory. I don't need to explain why. It's just not the Doctor. Just not the Doctor. End of story.
Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
You know, I was not overly enthused with the idea of a female Doctor, but watching the reveal, I sort of, give it a go. Give it a go. And then, I was quite willing to give her a go. I gave her five separate goes on 5 separate occasions on 5 separate episodes, and by the end of that, I was just like, no. And it sort of deteriorated from there. Really. So
what would you say was the biggest aspect that made it dislikable?
Just her disdain for the role, I think. I don't think she takes it seriously. I think she looks down her nose at the fandom. I don't think she's understood the character. I don't think she understands what she has. And I think it's like BB's kind of thing for her or something. I don't think she's got no connection to it. She doesn't understand the role at all. She's antithetical to the Doctor, like every other incarnation. She's a bumbling idiot. She's a genocidal maniac, and she's stupid. She's stupid, and she's careless. She gets a load of people killed, and she doesn't care.
Like you say,
she doesn't care about Graham's cancer.
Like you say, it's not the gender; it's just more how she's been written, really, hasn't it?
It's not the gender. It's not the gender. It's the fact that to represent someone's gender as just being an insufferable bitch, it's not. That's not representative of women at all, is it? I mean, it's just. I just don't understand the logic. It just seems so ridiculous to me.
Okay, and coming in at number 12?
Eccleston. I know that's going to be an extremely controversial. I just didn't connect with him at all. I just found him brash. I mean, I liked some of his comic elements. I wasn't a fan of his sort of Stan Laurel kind of grimaces and his fantastic kind of thing. I wasn't all that sold on the, look at me, I'm so working class Doctor. It just seems sort of really jarring for me. I mean, obviously as a class fan, it's quite different in many ways.
Well, that's the big difference, really, isn't it? Because I came into this, he was the Doctor, whereas for you, you had that kind of pre-established kind of understanding and of that version of Doctor Who, and then to suddenly have something so different, it must have been very much a shock, bit of a culture shock.
It was. I mean, it was. I don't think as well. I think we only had like 1 season with him, so I don't think that kind of helped. I think he did very well in running with it and sort of bringing it to a generation. I totally respect that. I just think it was a little too jarring for me. I mean, what do you? I mean, he was, was he your first Doctor? I can't remember. Was Tennant your first Doctor? Wasn't
Well, here's the interesting thing. When I watched his episodes, I
it? Mm,
think my mind was just so fixated on the Daleks that I forgot it was him. So
mm,
by the time I became sort of able to pick up what I was watching, Tennant was the Doctor. So I
yeah,
kind of, in my mind, put Tennant in his place. It wasn't until I got my very first Doctor Who DVD in Christmas 2006 where I realised, oh, he's the Doctor. And then he changes into Tennant because it was his last story that I got first.
yeah,
So my first ever Doctor Who story was a regeneration story, that I
yeah,
could process. So,
yeah.
it was he was kind of the shadow doctor for me. He was the doctor who was like, he was there. He was just there.
Mm.
like, you know. But as I said, I'll get onto that when it's my list.
Yeah, sure. Are we going to the next one?
Yeah, just let me know when you're ready. So number 8.
Colin Baker.
Now this is one that many people expect to be low down.
I was tempted to put him higher, but I've been sort of doing a little bit of a rewatch of some of his stuff. It's very difficult. I remember him first round, how upsetting it was because after the trauma of losing Tom Baker and having this young foppish guy take over, and then sort of getting used to him and thinking, well, actually he's really kind and nice and heroic, and then you get this sort of grumbly coward, paranoid schizophrenic or something take over.
Yeah.
And Colin said that he wanted his Doctor to wear pretty much what the Ninth Doctor wore, Eccleston's Doctor wore. And I think if he probably had done that, I don't think he would have been very remarkable as the Doctor, because I think it was more coat than Doctor, I mean, I did grow to like him to some degree. I always just thought it was a bit too pompous. Very melodramatic, I thought.
Yeah.
And I just think, I've listened to a lot of his Big Finish, a lot of his earlier Big Finish stuff really elevated his Doctor, I thought, not so much lately, but I think that I'm surprised at myself, because I would have thought he would have been higher up because of that. But really, I just think the strength of the other Doctors from this point on sort of just slightly nudge him out, really. Because I think a lot of these Doctors are quite middling for me. They it's the Doctor, so they're not my favourite, but they kind of.
But you acknowledge them.
Yeah, I acknowledge them, and they're passable. I've got a very, my top tier is really sort of the God tier, and it's a big drop off to the next bunch.
The interesting thing is like, if you're aware of the whole drama that was going on at the time, I think a lot of people like to blame Colin himself, and I actually think that's very unfair. And I really just think the poor guy got the wrong end of the stick, and I happen to think that his first season is one of the best in Classic Who. In terms of actual stories. I think it's because of all the negativity that was going on at the time that has created this legacy of kind of like, he was a bad Doctor, so it's all his fault. But I do understand, why he does have a reputation for. I think the characterization was just wrong. I know they wanted to go for Hartnell, and Hartnell could be a real evil bugger at first, but if you actually know the whole like behind the scenes thing, that was something Sidney Newman hated, and that's why Hartnell's character changes very dramatically after the first few stories, because they thought, this is unlikable, no one's going to like this. So naturally, when you create a character like that, you can expect some backlash.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take away from you. This is your section of the video.
No, I think that's a really interesting. Yeah, really interesting to say. Look, I think I think there's something intrinsic that you can't really intellectualize. You know, a lot of it's a gut feeling or just sort of emotive connection or something. There's always something that lures you in with a certain actor playing a doctor. I think that for me is much more important than, you know, what they're wearing or, you know, how popular they are amongst the girls or something like that. I think the Doctor requires a certain intellect, you know, and a certain gravitas, a certain prowess.
And I do think he had that in some scenes, but I think
yeah, but he was a bit too. He was too over the top with it. He was. There's a difference between being the smartest person in the room and knowing that you're the smartest. Yeah, knowing that you're the smartest person.
Yeah.
And he was, I guess, he's kind of like a bit of a poet. You know, the sort of more historically minded Doctor. He was into his
my
history.
My favorite bit. Thou craggy knob.
Yes.
Yeah, everyone in the chat's like, "What did he just say?" Go look it up. Go watch the Twin Dilemma.
Yeah, Twin Dilemma. Oh God, yeah.
It's a boat. It's not what you're thinking.
That definitely one of the most difficult transitions there. I think
it's as bad as everyone says it is.
It kind of is, but there's some elements to it I like. You know, like his meeting his old friend and stuff like that. And he's not a bad dude, and he's a good guy. Really, the slug thing can fuck off. You know.
I mean, hey, I like Time Lash. A lot of people don't.
Hey, hashtag justice for Time Lash. It's got Paul Darrow in it. I don't know what else you want. You know, come on, he's ham it up to the nines. It's great.
Makeup's fantastic.
It's good. Look, I think one of the main contentions with it is it's such a sort of bland set. You know.
Yeah.
I think that goes against it a lot. I think, you know, there's some good elements in there.
The story's good.
Yeah, I like the story, and I loved H.G. Wells as a companion.
Is it
I think he should have stayed on.
Is the creature the Borad?
The Borad, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I've pronounced that wrong, but I'll get onto that when I.
One of the gayest androids as well. The one with the blue face. You know, it was like something from art pop from the the early 80s. You know, it was quite amusing. The shoulder pads from hell. So interesting choice there, JNT. Interesting.
Okay, so we've had Doctor 13, Doctor 9, and Doctor 6. So, what are we on? Number 9 for you. What would that be?
I was struggling with this one. Again, not liking the fact he's lower down than I would like. But it's Paul McGann. Until like a few minutes ago, I think it was a little bit higher up. But
a few minutes ago.
No, seriously. I mean, I'm sat here with the bloody tear maker going, actually, I'm going to move that one. Because that's the thing with, these lists is they are never concrete. They're always shifting about because you review a season of Doctor Who with a particular Doctor, and actually, I really, really like that. And it can affect change, It's funny because we were talking about before we came on and like how much more we'd like to put him higher up, and then I end up putting him lower down. It's only because the Doctor after him is I just thought it was I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it to him. And I mean, he has only been on screen twice. He has some excellent big adventures. Storm Warning,
I've heard Minuet in Hell.
Yeah, I tried to listen to that one. That was not very good. It was just terrible American accents. And, oh god, yeah, some hammy stuff going on in that. But a lot of it was very, very good. I liked his Dark Eyes stuff and some of the Doom Coalition stuff, some of the Time War stuff. So yeah, the what was it? The Stranded, they can fuck off. I mean, it was just like, let's be intersectional lesbians now and talk about paying bills and rent. It's just like episode after episode, just the most banal. conversations,
I
and
think
nothing happened.
they dragged Paul McGann into that.
Mm,
He's just sat there
yeah,
like, when's the sci-fi gonna happen?
yeah. It was just nothing happened till like the last story, and it was just like by
Oh
that point I
god.
was just comatose. You know,
See, this is why I'm
shame
kind of
really.
glad. I'm kind of glad that Big Finish doesn't affect my results. 'Cause,
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, when it comes to things like Colin Baker and Paul McGann, particularly, I think that extended universe that we're given. I think it's same to a degree with Eccleston as well. But that the more content, the more stories we have with these doctors, which have been somewhat limited or not particularly very good in some cases. But we are given we're given a chance. They're given a chance to,
yeah.
and we're given a chance to enjoy them more. And McGann, bless him, he's risen to it. He clearly loved it, and he's grown with that character. And he's probably been one of the longest serving doctors, actually, out of all of them.
Well, that's the funny thing. He technically is
Mm.
the longer. I mean, for a long time, it was McCoy, and everyone said it was Baker, but no, McCoy was technically the Doctor until the 1996 TV movie. So McCoy was the Doctor for about 8 years and something like that, wasn't he?
Uh, 89 to 96. What's that?
7 years. Oh no, actually, does Baker just beat him?
Tom Baker's, I think, 6.5, 7, nearly 7 years.
They're about the same.
Mm.
Okay, so what have we done? We've done right. So number 8 for you.
Yes. So next, and this was really difficult for me. Patrick Troughton.
Oh, okay.
Love him to bits. Love him as an actor. Love him as a character actor. Love him as the Doctor. Just not enough of him. Again, this is the sort of problem with his stories, where some of them were just amazing,
Yeah.
really good, and he's so adorable, especially with Jamie. It's just there are a lot of duds, and you can't afford that many duds when there's so few episodes remaining, and that's no reflection on him. There's no reflection on him at all, and he was really the template for all other Doctors. So it's kind of a bit irksome for me to put him where he is in the list, because I just think, well, without him, there would be none of the current Doctors that we've got.
Well, I think for me, the only reason where he is because of his good moments, and his good moments are just like they're fantastic, aren't they?
Yeah.
And he was the Doctor. He was the Doctor that if without him, we wouldn't have had any of the others.
That's it, exactly. As I say, he was the template. He really set the bar for what you could do with the character. It was quite a flip from Hartnell, but it gave actors who took the role opportunities that they probably wouldn't have had if they would have just gone on to make another Hartnell. It would have remained the same character sort of over and over and over again. So I think that was a very brave decision. It didn't work out so well for his run, because it nearly got cancelled. But but again, without that,
would the Pertwee
era what would Pertwee have done exactly?
Sometimes you need a bit of a down to give you a boost, don't you?
It was it was a time, to borrow a phrase, and I'm sorry for using it. It was a time of flux. There was a moment there where it was sink or swim time, and I think colour television really did help bring Doctor Who back, and I think that what made that change. Now, again, I have to emphasise that, as I said, after the last few Doctors, there was a massive sort of increase. It's more of a sort of a toss between these Doctors, that I'm going to talk about, because they're so close to each other, I think, in terms of how I regard them. And it was a struggle here, because I was flitting between putting him higher up and slightly lower down, and slightly higher up, slower down. But it's not much, but it's like a paper cut between them, really. But I think he has suffered mostly because the lack of his stories. I have been listening to his son Michael Troughton do the Second Doctor stories, and I've been quite enjoying some of those. So it's nice to see the character sort of getting more stories.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that we didn't have enough.
Wasn't it wonderful? Wasn't it wonderful every time they brought him back? There was such a positive reaction, wasn't there? I think he is a favourite.
When he was in the 5 Doctors, and when he was in the 3 Doctors, and when he was in the 2 Doctors, he acted everyone off the screen. Even Pertwee was foiled by Troughton. Troughton was just absolutely a joy to watch.
And I love the banter between them, you know.
Absolutely. And for that, he's an absolute treasure, you know. And I don't think any other actor, even Tom Baker, you know, would have struggled to have competed with Troughton on that score. Quite honestly, you know what I feel about Tom Baker. That'll come later. But yeah, I mean, it's wonderful that we had that extra bit of him, really, you know, that popped up, you know, for those extra 3 stories. And I love the 3 Doctors. I think for me that's a beautiful story.
It's very underrated, I think.
It really is. I think it gets a little bit stick. Same really with the 2 Doctors, although really the first episode I think is the best one. Let's be honest. I wasn't a great fan of the of some of the characters in that story, which I thought made it drag a bit, you know, and the setting was a bit overkill, really, wasn't it?
I love Omega though. Fantastic.
Omega in the 3 Dots, just a great villain. And so many times he's been teased to be coming back, and of course it's just fans speculating away, and it's never bloody Omega, is it? It's never the Rani, it's never bloody Omega. Give us a bloody Rani and Omega, for heaven's sake. It's not too much to ask.
Okay, so which number are we at? Number 7?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So next, is it number 6? That can't be right. Wait, 1, 2, 3, right.
Sorry, we're counting backwards, guys.
Yeah, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. So that was 9. 8. Okay. So we're at number 8.
Number 8, right.
Yes. And number 8, I put David Tennant.
Oh. It's fine. Just going with it. Going with it.
Breathe. It's not so I haven't enjoyed him at all. I just find him too human. And the whole Rose thing was just such a massive distraction to me. I was just like, just stop, not on board the romance train, I'm afraid, and that was obviously done for the fangirls and the 10 stands and
look, I don't
teenage love market.
I don't like them. Okay, they are the most irritating type of fan, but they helped make the show a success. Whether you like them or not, my mom and dad distinctly remember the Doctor and Rose, the Doctor and Kathy, even the Doctor and Martha. And I think, and I think Russell had this way. I don't necessarily like the characterization of Rose, especially in Series 2, now that I've grown up a bit. When I was a kid, of course, I didn't understand. I was just crying like everybody else. But now I've grown up, I've really seen a bit of a dark side to her. It does put me off, but obviously I completely understand where you're coming from. And actually, seeing Eccleston so low on the list, I actually expected Tennant to be lower on your list, honestly. So I'm actually quite happy that he's this high.
He's grown in my estimation, actually. He used to be right at the bottom, actually. Probably not as low as Baker, Colin Baker. But I think what it is that I've listened to some of his Big Finish stuff and some of the stuff he did with Tom Baker as well, and I enjoyed that. And he has a very good mercurial element quality to him, which I like, and I've grown to like more And you know, he might even go up higher in my list after the 60th. He might go down, you know. But I think a lot of it's. I struggled with New Who for a long time, and I still do to this day. More so now, obviously. But it was always because I had a very sort of firm, fixed idea of what Doctor Who was to me growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, and right till it was off air and through the wilderness years. And I liked that he was a good-looking younger Doctor and dashing and heroic and all that. I thought that was great. But it just felt a bit too on the nose with the sort of dressing the Doctor down. I think Russell T Davies went to great lengths to make him not wear a costume. It was clothes. And, I'd never agreed with that decision. I never did. And I always thought the Doctor should be more outlandish, really. But he had some really good moments with his sort of almost Baker-like eye-popping stuff going on. I found a lot of the Alonzi thing and the silly faces and him constantly go, well, it's like, well, this,
what is
well,
it about older people that
oh.
you just don't like comedy?
I think it was too comedic in some places, but then I think that's quite a problem.
I think that's
modern day
RTD
Doctor Who.
style.
That's not to say humour doesn't play an important part, because obviously with Tom Baker's Doctor, particularly, he was very comedic, but it was so it didn't even need to be written. He would just act that. It wouldn't be in the script, but he just put it in, you know, and it worked. It did worked much earlier on. I think more in the Hinchcliffe era than perhaps under the Williams. I think maybe went a bit too far. I quite liked it personally. I loved his. He was clearly in his zone with Douglas Adams script editing. I think those two work well together. A lot of people find it too comedic, but I think if you compare the comedy of Tom Baker and Douglas Adams in the Williams era, and compare it to modern New Who, I don't think there's any more or less humour in that era than there was under Tennant and RTD. In fact, I'd say it was less comedic. And for me, the comedy worked better under Tom Baker because it was more naturalistic to him.
Yeah,
this was much more scripted, if you know what I mean, rather than off the cuff.
Well, I'm going to wait for my list. I'm going to wait for my list, but I think I do see where you're coming from. But I think Tennant did add a lot of his own personality to it, and I think that becomes
I think they all do,
obvious in
really.
a lot of areas.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to put him higher. I think he's probably one of those Doctors that over time will continue to grow on me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I just felt obviously I much preferred him to Eccleston, and I think he had an excellent run of stories apart from Fear Her and a few others. Yeah. But even then, he sort of elevated what he was given, and that's a sign of a really great actor. And you know, where he is in the list,
I think but where he is in the list wasn't a good story.
Well, no.
And I think he deliberately went really comedic, like with the marmalade jar, which I love. He just puts his finger in the marmalade jar, and the mother goes, ahem. He's just stood there like, don't mind me.
He's got really great moments. I'm not going to knock him. You know, I'm not going to denigrate him, mate. He is a. You know, I know how popular he is.
No, look, I've made it abundantly clear that should never come into ranking a Doctor. Don't just like a character because lots of other people do. Don't just hate a character or a film because lots of other people do. You should always,
and you know, bearing in mind he's there. He's above. I'll put him above Troughton, and I don't hate Troughton.
Which I wasn't expecting.
So there you are, you know, like, and for me, a lot of the classic Who is supreme. You know, for me, that's what Doctor Who really is. You know, that's what it was. That's how it was created. And when they brought it back, I just never felt that they sort of really sort of picked up that torch. But at the same time, I concede, it's a different time, different type of audience, different type of television. So I get that, I do get that. I do understand that. I'm not, not that past it, but you know what I mean? It's like,
sorry.
it's like, I just know in my heart, what feels like Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And New Who's always sort of fallen short of that. But it's not to say that I haven't enjoyed it. Of course I have.
But hey, when RTD reboots the show, I could have exactly the same feeling. It might not click with me.
Exactly.
It might
And
not click
that
with
might be
me.
the same going forward with, who follows him. I mean,
Yeah.
we just don't know. We just never know. And that's the terrifying and the beautiful thing about Doctor Who. You just never know what it's going to be
Right.
next.
So let's, what are we on, number 6?
No, God, 7, isn't it?
Number 7.
Yeah, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Yeah, so 7.
Okay.
So number
So number
7,
7.
I have the 7th Doctor.
Ah, that's nice. I was wondering if that would happen. Like, would the number be the actual Doctor?
It's happened. So yeah. Now in 1989, if you'd have asked me like, where would Sylvester sit, it wouldn't have been. I think it might have come in last. He would have been 7 out of 7. Because first impressions count, and that introduction was not good. There was a lot of things going against him, and that was even the fact that he was following on with an unpopular Doctor, generally considered to be an unpopular Doctor. But it was such a massive contrast. And Doctor Who is a show about contrast. Everyone who plays the Doctor is a massive contrast from the previous person to play the Doctor, more often than not. Not always, but most often than not. And it was very comedic. I think what boosted him really was having rewatched and he's also got some Big Finish stories. Not the best, I have to say. It definitely sounds like I'm here for the paycheck. But he's fun, he's fun, he's mischievous, he's got a dark side, which was really didn't really come to the fore so much until sort of his second season, and particularly his third season, it went a lot darker. And I think he had an awful hell of a time with it, because he didn't have everything really going for him particularly. But there's something reassuring about his Doctor. It's like it's someone you feel out of all the Doctors, he'd be the sort of most fun to hang out with. Sort of to go on really daft adventures in Neon Land somewhere, in Neon Planet, with all the 80s stuff around. And I liked him more later on. I didn't like him much at the time. He did grow on me even when I was at school, because I did go to a school fete pretty much dressed as Sylvester.
Yeah, you told me about this.
Yeah, and that didn't go down too well. But I've got an umbrella. I've got an umbrella with the question mark downstairs somewhere, even though it's broken. And he grew on me. He did grow on me. But it's probably because I was surrounded by friends, who were Doctor Who fans. We had a Doctor Who club at my school, and so we all sort of hung out we used to go and watch his stories and then talk about it the next day. And we went to visit the BBC, and we met him at the dress rehearsal for Ghostlight. So we got to meet him and Sophie and JNT. I mean, he'd come to our school before. And he was absolutely lovely. And because he's so lovely and so nice, and I've enjoyed watching him making his appearances. I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos with him, indeed, and he's so much fun. He's such a fun guy, and so lovely. It would be criminal to put him in love, because I do enjoy him. I do like him.
No, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Trauma. So yeah, I think No, that's a nice treasured memory right there, isn't it? Really. So I couldn't really put many lower than that.
Yeah. I've got a lot to say about him on my list, actually, and
Mm.
I do actually think he's one of the most underrated. But moving on to number 6, we'll try
I
and
didn't
get
like
this
the way he
movie.
was taken out either. I think he should have been in the film a bit longer before he got mowed down like that. That was so cool. Didn't
I
like that at
know.
all.
Actually,
It's not the way I wanted him to go.
looking back on it, it's almost kind of like people who hated him must have absolutely loved that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I would have known plenty of people who might have felt the same way. I'm
So
sure there were a lot of cheers,
that's a bit
sadly.
harsh.
But you know, time is a great thing. You know, it makes you mellow on certain things, and you know, I certainly
Mm.
mellowed on him. I mean, even at the time, I mellowed on him, but you know, over the years, more so, I'd say.
But coming in at number 6.
Number 6, I have the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith.
Okay.
Great first season. Didn't like his costume at all. I didn't really like him at all. I at that point I was gotten used to Tennant and thinking, yeah, he's not bad actually. But then you know, when he did that, I don't want to go. So just fuck off, you whinging fuck.
Oh my god.
And then he came in. I think the John Geronimo thing. I thought, oh, not another Alonzi. You know, oh god, it was unfortunate. But like, why I've gotten this far up, and why have I got more higher than Tennant? Well, I just like the fact that he proved everyone wrong, me included. And he had a certain steeliness behind those eyes, those really deep set, burning coal eyes. And yes, he sort of had a sort of trendy, sort of Shoreditch twat look about him, and you know, the trousers having the argument with the socks, and the bow tie, little bow legs you could pass the pig through, his little rickety legs. But he had a youthfulness to him, fashionness to him, but also this incredible old fartiness about him as well. You know, fuddy duddiness.
He's a
And he had,
young man making the old man look work.
and he did that perfectly. And he was very inspired, as we know, by Patrick Troughton.
Yeah.
As I would say that Sylvester was, really, you know. So bless him for that. But I think with Smith, he brought back a sort of certain alien detachment again, which I liked. He was more alien than Tennant was, and his sort of social faux pas and miscuing things and getting things arse around tit ways. That I like that, you know. I like that kind of, and in not caring, just being completely oblivious to being a completely social misfit, you know, because he just totally doesn't conform. It's not a conformist, this Doctor, which I like. Can you Jodie Whittaker? And you know, I liked his costume with the purple coat. I loved all that. I think obviously what he suffered from really was the writing, and I think Moffat really sort of burnt out. You know, especially after the 50th,
season.
really. Yeah, after one season. But you know, they had this kind of build up, which I think worked to some degree, but it was also a bit squandered in others. You know, and I think the 50th was a bit over bloated in a sort of
Most
overpraised,
overrated episode
yeah.
ever.
I mean, I saw it at the cinema. I was enjoying it with a friend and in the middle of a massive audience. That was great. But it's one of those things you sort of walk out, oh, that was great, and then you start thinking about it. Oh, that wasn't.
Yeah, a lot of
Could have been better. Could have been better written. Yeah, I mean, bless him. I mean, he even with Tom Baker on the screen with him, you know, that he managed not to be acted off the screen, which shows, you know, you're there with the legend that is Tom Baker, and still managed to hold your own against that.
And I love that scene where he's with David Bradley in An Adventure in Space and Time.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah, that was
Sorry.
just a look, smile. You know, wonderful. I mean, he can emote. That's the thing with Matt Smith's acting. He emoted so much through his movements, through his. I thought it was a bit too swishy at times. I like just stand fucking still, start spinning around, and so your coat can fly out, and stuff like that did get on my tits a little bit. And that bloody sonic screwdriver, which I love, by the way, but it was just like, stop bloody using it and looking at it.
Do you know what, Lee?
Got a
You've actually affected my list,
Ooh.
which is worrying.
Ooh.
Let's just say that to those watching, my list is going to be drastically different. I'm going to get beer bottles thrown at me. So,
Wow.
it's okay. So,
yeah, look, I mean, I don't. As I said, judging these doctors, not just judging them on the scripts that they're given. You're judging them on the actor and the performance and what they bring to the character. I think and even when you're dished out crap, and still manage to make it almost bearable because you've got a great central actor pulling you through it, making it less painful. I mean, there were moments that I could have slapped him myself, more than Clara or I think he suffered from after Amy and Rory left. I think they were the best companions he had.
Yeah.
And we haven't really talked about companions, have we? But
I'll make another video.
yeah, but I think Clara really sort of just insufferable. I mean, she didn't start off as bad. I prefer Victoria. I think that would have been better, much more interesting.
Yes.
Especially with this more Victoria look. I think when he, was in retirement, that would have worked much better. I think. I still think though he elevated what he was given.
And I have nothing against Jenna Coleman. I've heard she's lovely. I think she's a great actress, but I just think Clara as a character is insufferable.
Absolutely.
100%. But anyway, that's for a whole nother video. Like, I think we'll do a companion-related video. So I believe
the only thing I would say with him would be that when he got the angry thing going, when he in the ring of Akatan or whatever it was, I just didn't. When he was sort of wailing and shouting, when he was cross, he didn't have the same crossness energy that Tennant had. I think Tennant had a bit more gravitas with the shouty, angry thing. I think he did that more smouldering intensely. I just think Smith's voice just wasn't strong enough to really sort of deliver the clout. That's my main criticism. But other than that, and I think as well the comedy element with Moffat, because Moffat is really a comedy writer, and I think the comedy element was a bit too over the top in his era,
especially when he burst out the cake and said, "Your wife tried to kiss me."
Yeah, I mean the line itself wasn't bad. It's the bursting out the cake thing, really, and the running around with his arms flailing.
I think for me, the trouble was you had such serious doctors like Eccleston and Tennant, and then you suddenly go to this, and I think like watching Tom turn into Peter, it was such a shock for me watching Tennant turn into this guy. Yeah, but as I say, I'll get onto that when I do my list. So, number 5.
Number
I'm gonna
5.
have to give you way longer than half an hour.
Well, this doctor has slipped down in my estimations, and that's probably due to the sort of rewatches of his story. It's not really sort of ranking on him personally or anything. I basically, there are 2 doctors that have now been shoved up the list from previously, so he's actually slipped down 2 places, and that's because I've revisited these 2 doctors, these other 2 doctors eras, and I think in one case sparked memories, and in the other case I found a much more refreshed view of, and we'll come to that. But 5th place is 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi.
Right.
And this will be controversial with some people we know. But it's not because I haven't moved him down my list because I don't like him as much or whatever. But I think really he is a great amalgamation of classic Doctors into a New Who era, which I appreciated. And when he was cast and announced, I was ecstatic. I was fucking on my feet cheering because I was like, yes, finally, because I was hoping it was going to be him, and it was. And I think he was undeserved, incredibly undeserved. But he was so watchable, and his eyes, the eyes.
Well,
and,
yes.
Just the depth of and he had a very sharp wit and a cutting tongue, which I liked. Very much the sort of Malcolm Tucker element that he brought into it. I wasn't sold entirely suddenly Scottish, but why not? I guess. I mean, all planets of the North, we were told, but do all planets over Scotland now as well? I suppose so.
Well, it's funny because he was the third Doctor to be Scottish, but the first one to keep the Scottishness.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that Sylvester's accent was there. He did have a Scottish lilt to it, but it was much more.
I think it was more
subtle.
just rolling the R's, like the, But
Yes.
aside from that, I think
slight elements of his. It was just softly spoken, probably from where he's from, rather than being uber Scottish. But this is like a tale of 2 or 3 Doctors, though, isn't it? With Capaldi's run, because he started very prickly, very offish, very aggressive, kind of almost reminiscent of the Colin Baker era, without the cowardice. But I liked that. I liked him being, again, a contrast to Smith's more sweeter Doctor. Again, leaning into sort of alienness, as much as you can be alien and Scottish at the same time, but then he sort of mellowed out, didn't he, as he went along. I guess it's a bit like the first Doctor in a way. He sort of starts off very prickly and grumpy, and it sort of becomes much more affable and jolly.
Yeah.
It was quite a journey, and it was quite a meme, really, wasn't it? The bigger his hair got, the more sort of chill he became, and it's like you go through a midlife crisis with the guitar and everything, and the sunglasses. But look, his tour de force was really, what was it? Which one was it? Not Death in Heaven, was it? It was. Oh, my brain's gone fried. It's just heat is unbearable. The one he was on his own.
Oh, Heaven Sent.
Heaven Sent. That's jeez. So yeah, I think I can understand why people think that. But to be the first time we've really seen the Doctor on his own since The Deadly Assassin.
Yeah, true.
And it's a hefty thing to pull off. And he was really on his own, not like in Deadly Assassin where Tom Baker.
There's other characters. No, he was the only character. I mean, there was the monster, but it was silent, so he was the only one talking. And to keep an audience watching through that, that takes skill. And my little cousin, that was the first episode she ever saw, and Capaldi was her favourite for a long time.
Well, there you go, from that one performance. But I mean, it was very, and being a fan of the Hinchcliffe era, seeing that sort of gothic thing in there. I liked the elements when they mixed the gothic in with any Doctor Who, really, but with Capaldi, it really sort of did work. It did have that sort of Pertwee Baker feel about his Doctor. Bit of Peter Cushing almost in the look of him as well. But
yeah, he does.
Yeah, especially in that picture, bloody hell. But again, he was sort of. I think sometimes he would fall into certain speech patterns, like he's chewing on a wasp almost. And it's like
I think he said "shut up" too much. He was like "shut it up, up."
Yeah, I mean that's great. Yeah, I mean it was a bit of an amalgamation of different things put together. Malcolm Tucker and Pertwee and Hartnell and all those things, which, you know, is nice. You know, we got a nice run of sort of very classic feels about it, which made me happier. Just wish the writing would have been better and more on point. He was really badly underserved, and that has impacted my enjoyment of his Doctor, not because of him necessarily. I mean, there were some things he would do, and it's just take really strange breaths in between lines. And it's like,
Absolutely, and I just want to say, when I do my list, please forgive me for where I've put him, because I think many of the positionings comes down to their eras and not the actors themselves.
It's hard to extrapolate the Doctor from the
their
environment,
eras.
the era. I mean, it's not in isolation, is it? You know, it's very part and parcel. I mean, you can make allowances to a certain point. I think he would have been. I mean, he was my third favorite until more recently. But that's only because I sort of revisited certain Doctors and gleaned new or forgotten feelings, you know, and so.
Right. Well, I hate to tell you this, Lee, but you have 15 minutes to cover 4 Doctors.
Wrap it up. Okay,
Yeah.
so fourth place. Fourth place, I have the 5th Doctor, Peter Davison.
Okay.
Now, with Peter Davison, he came in when I was 6 years old, and I became a fan of Doctor Who, I think, as early as one of my earliest TV memories, if not one of my earliest memories, full stop, is of Tom Baker in Destiny of the Daleks, so 79. And I was absolutely sold. You know, I became a fan at that moment. You know, him facing off Davros and being more terrified of Tom Baker than I was of Davros, I remember. But Romana made me feel safe. So she was all right with him, then I was all right with him. And I remember, you know, being sort of 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, carrying around a Tom Baker and a TARDIS tin, you know, I had from the shop. Took me. I was suffering PTSD or PTRD, post Tom regeneration disorder, after he turned into Peter Davison, and I was mortified. I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. Like most people who are young when they first get to Doctor Who and they see regenerations, what's happening? Why? Where's it gone? When's it coming back? That was really where I was at. And I was mortified, and I kept expecting him to return. And this imposter was in a new costume, calling himself the Doctor, and I didn't understand. But over, you know, I think when he came in, I was 6, so 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a lot of maturing goes on in those years, so you sort of get slightly different perspective as you get slightly older, and, you know, going to middle school at that point. And I grew to like him. I grew to trust him, and to feel he was so nice. You couldn't really dislike him. You know, it was just such an affable Doctor. And yes, he could be sort of grumpy, you know, channeling his Hartnell in a way, I think. But I don't know. He just felt like a really safe, assuring person to go on a sort of space and time travel with. And, you know, I liked the companions at the time. You know, Turlo and Tegan. I know she gets a lot of stick, but I loved her. I think mainly because she reminded me so much of my cousin. She was just a miserable cow as well.
I think Tegan was actually Peter's best companion. I don't really count Perry because she came in only for the last 2 stories. But I think, you know, Turlo was evil. Nissa never said he did anything.
He was manipulated, you know. But that was interesting.
No, but the thing is, he was still a bit of a, you know, a douche before all that happened.
Yeah, but he redeemed himself, and then you had Tegan, who was just not taking any bullshit from anyone. I kind of like that. She was spiky and, you know, mouthy, and, you know.
I don't think she deserves the hate she gets.
I don't think so. I know. I can understand it. Sometimes, yeah, you do want to slap her, you know.
Okay.
I'm not advocating violence against women.
So sorry to have to rush you. It's just
yep.
Okay, so number 3. No,
Number
or is it number
three,
4? Is it number 4?
number three,
Number 3, okay.
number three. William Hartnell.
Ah, I'm glad.
Yeah.
That's something we both have in common. He's in the
Mm,
top 3. He's in the top
nice
3.
one. Yeah, I used to really undervalue him unfairly, and I can't claim that I'm a huge fan of the black and white era of Doctor Who. For me, Doctor Who was at its peak in the 70s. But I've, as a, I've been recently sort of working on a First Doctor audio drama with this guy Sean Hughes, who does an amazing. He's a young guy, but he does a really convincing William Hartnell. Bloody hell, it's incredible. And it's only sort of through the editing process of the story that was. It's not an old story, so it's a written by Chris from Black Glove Studio. He seems to really just fundamentally understand the Doctor, and William Hartnell's Doctor, and it's just listening to certain nuances. I just grew to love Sean's representation of Hartnell, and I kept thinking about Hartnell, and I could, because he was so good as the voice of Hartnell. I kept listening and thinking of him, and I couldn't help but think of him, the actor, And I think I see with all the horrible rewriting of trying to undermine his place as the First Doctor, it just sickens me so
Yeah. And as I
deeply.
say, we'll focus on stuff like that in another video.
Yeah, sure. But and that I just wanted to sort of start off with that, and it sort of made me start really thinking about his era and just how unusual he was, and to try and put myself back in the days when my dad was a fan of, and my dad's favorite Doctor is still William Hartnell, and so I just think that he is the archetype, he is the original, Messi, but he is so different to all the others, and we should never forget what he brought to the role. That we wouldn't have what we have today.
No.
That might be a thing or a bad thing. He started it all, and we owe him so much deference. And I could not live with myself if I put no doubt. And he is adorable as the Doctor.
Yeah.
He's
not
wonderful.
He's not what these modern day, they call themselves fans, but he's not what they portray him as. And this is someone who has gone back and watched all of the stories that are available.
Yeah, smack bottoms and all that. All he did was ask for someone to make him some tea. Is that too much to ask for an old man?
Okay, you're complaining about 1963. It was 2000s, and I was told way worse than that. So if you're going to complain about that, were you raised by teddy bears? Like, Christ. That's nothing compared to what
Hartnell deserves so much more respect than he's currently getting. And I think he's underrated incredibly badly. The stories are a mixed bag. I mean, we have to look at it in the context of the time it was in. And yeah, a lot of it seems very sort of play of the day. But it's of its time. But he brought such a unique and interesting mystery and joy. And he was prickly, and we didn't really know who he was, a man of mystery, this old geezer. And then he sort of became the nation's granddad. Like Wilf today, Bernard Cribbins, very similar to that in a way. And I just love him as he goes along. His latter stories really sort of become much more. His character's much more developed, and he could see he's loving it. It's sad how it ended for him, but he brought such a joy to a whole generation, and thanks to him, we have this wonderful show. So yeah, that can't go unnoticed. As far as
right. So coming in at number 2.
Number 2, the Doctor, John Pertwee. Very, very, very close second. Very, very close second.
I know we were talking about this.
What can you say? I mean, the man lived the Doctor. I think these three, the top 3, really did embody that role more than just about anybody, I think.
Yeah.
And I just think that he was such, not only a competent pair of hands to put the character in, but he just did it with such a plum and style, panache and action and gadgets and fun and intelligence. You know, can't underestimate the power of intelligence. He had it in spades. This man was a real life James Bond, you know, like pretty much. I urge anybody who's listening to this to go and look up on YouTube an audience with Jon Pertwee. Bloody hell, that guy has a tale or two to tell about his life story. It's absolutely fascinating.
It's actually very heartbreaking as well.
I mean, there's stories of when he was at war, when he saw his mates get blown up on the ship. You know, that's he nearly got blown up, didn't he? In another incident. It's horrendous, you know. But that amount of life experience really helps sell an actor into a role, because they can deeply delve into that, all those elements of what's happened to them in their past. And then, you know, you can tell this character of this particular iteration of the Doctor, this incarnation, has experienced an awful lot of things in his life, and it shows. It really shows. And his ensemble with Unit and the Brigadier and Joe and Sarah Jane and the Master, not Anthony Ellie, the Delgado Master, the chemistry of such a large ensemble in that era, it's unsurpassed. You know, that is a pure delight. And I remember watching Pirates of his era at our Doctor Who club, because it was time before the VHS was released, and some of the episodes were still in black and white because they'd been lost and refound, and only in black and white, so they had to be recolored later. So and there were really like copies of copies, and you know, it's really like hard to watch because it was such bad quality, but we sat there enthralled. And the only sort of time we'd ever sort of really met the Third Doctor prior to that was the Five Doctors, really. And so seeing all these wonderful stories that weren't released commercially at that point when I was at school, so about 88, 87, 88, 89, we got to see an awful lot more of his Doctor. He was very popular in our fan club at school, and so we grew to absolutely love his Doctor. And you know, I grew up with the Anthony Ainley Master, but I discovered this whole other Master who was just amazing. You know, the original, obviously. Bless him. And I got to meet him. I got to meet Jon Pertwee at when he played the Doctor at the Ultimate Adventure at Wimbledon Theatre. And got to meet him backstage in his dressing room. He's in his dressing gown or smoking jacket, or whatever it was. He was very tired, and he was so sweet to us. He was like sat there, and he just looked up at us, staring down at him. And he's, "Do you want to ask me any questions?" This awkward silence. We didn't know what to say. We were so tongue-tied. And I was like, "Hey, can I have your autograph?" It was pathetic, really pathetic. But he was so patient with us, and
he loved the fans.
He really, you know, he really did embody the role, and you know, he would turn up in his costume and things like that. And the fact he went out, you know, in the late '80s and to tour playing the Doctor again, you know, you can tell he loved it absolutely. And watching the Ultimate Adventure, which was dreadful, but he didn't care because it was Jon Pertwee, and you know, we all cheered when he said, you know, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow and all that. It was fantastic. That was great. So yeah, solid.
So I think it's no real question as to who is the number one.
Yeah, number one of my god tier is obviously fourth to Tom Baker, one that I was introduced to, one that I'd say I can't say I grew up with him, because I really grew up with Peter Davison's Doctor, but he was my first Doctor was Tom Baker, and he was the one I absolutely fell in love with. And it wasn't really until my school days with the Doctor Who club did I get to rewatch stories or to watch stories I hadn't seen of his, because bearing in mind these weren't really repeated. So I missed his doctor for years, you know, already at that point, you know. By 87, I went to my high school. And by then he'd been gone for 6 years, you know. So I hadn't seen his doctor for so long. And it was just such joy watching Genesis of the Daleks and City of Death and all these stories on these tapes, you know, which hadn't really been released at that point. I don't think, certainly there wasn't a massive market yet for, I think only one had been released at that point. I can't remember which one it was. And it just rekindled my love, and really sort of thanks to the internet again, you know. I mean, I was always sort of in my life sort of quite carefree and going out and partying and not really having enough money for anything else. So I wasn't really, Doctor Who wasn't at the forefront of my mind for most of the wilderness years. I was too busy going out getting wrecked. But thanks to the internet age, you know, getting to relive his doctor again really rekindled my passion. And he is just the doctor, you know. I talk about perfectly embodying the role. I think Tom Baker literally was the doctor. Yeah. If he'd have materialized now in my living room, I well believe it was, you know.
Daniel, Scottish Davros says, your Tom Baker story still makes me laugh. I think he's referring to the one where he called you names.
Oh, I didn't realise there were people in the chat. Hello, I've just been waffling. Hello.
Yeah, they got Noel,
Hello,
you've
Noel.
got Willie's Arcade,
hello,
Scottish
hello, Willie's
Davros.
Arcade. Wow, I didn't know. Sorry, guys. I would have said hello earlier. So yeah, crikey. God, I bet Daniel's off for putting Paldy at 5th place. Forgive me. But yeah, so the story that Daniel's referring to is I just started my first, I think it's the first day of a new job, working front of house in the West End Theatre, the Queen's Theatre, in 1995. And it was Prisoner Cell Block H, the musical with Lily Savage. Best job ever. I'd fucking love that show. It's so much fun. But it's the first day. And it was I think it was a matinee day. It must have been a matinee day because it was still early daylight. And I was it was the height of the sort of IRA threat. So you weren't allowed to leave your post. You weren't allowed to move. You had to stay exactly where you were. And I was on my own. And the manager fucked off upstairs or wherever her office was. And in rolls Tom Baker with his wife. And he's red in the face, clearly back from the pub. Where's the bar? I was just like, you know, he's like Tom Baker, you know, my doctor, my hero. I looked to my left, and the bar was roped off, and the lights were switched off. That meant no one was tending the bar, and I was on my own. I couldn't leave where I was because IRA threats and blah blah blah. And I was like, I didn't know what to do. I was like, it's not open yet. Big mistake. Big mistake. What? Get me the manager. What do you mean the bar isn't open? Get the manager. Fucking hell. So I thought, well, he's here. I can rush off to get them. Wet behind the ears. You know, I was only like, what, 20. So I ran off, got the manager, and told her what the situation was, panicking. So she came down with me, and he's like, this streak of piss won't let me to the bar. I was mortified. And so she said, oh, I do apologise. Just like to stay. So she went, pulled the velvet rope away and took him downstairs to the bar, and that was it. I was absolutely crushed. But you know what? He was drunk. He was clearly drunk.
He wasn't himself.
And I was wet. If I had been more like, you know, on the ball, if I hadn't been so wet behind the ears, I would have, you know, go and sort that out for you, and butted him up somewhat, saying you're my doctor or something. You know, like all the things that could have been done didn't happen. But as he's gotten older, he seems to have mellowed out a little bit.
But to still have Tom Baker at number one after an experience like that, what a round of applause Lee deserves.
The trauma. Well, I think, but the trauma of losing him as a doctor was much more traumatic than him telling me I was a streaky piss. But I still, at least it gives me something to say. And I did during the 50th. I went with a friend to the Robots of Death at the BFI, and he was on the panel. And I was the one who got the last question in, and I was so tempted to ask him, "Am I still a streaky piss?" I'm sure there'll be some people who would agree, but I didn't. I can't remember what I asked
he
him.
Probably wouldn't remember anyway.
Exactly. I didn't want to sort of,
So just before I finally get my turn on the swing, what would you just like to, for people who've come in a bit late, would you just just don't give all the details, just go over the list of your doctors from worst to best?
Yeah. So last place we have Eccleston. I'm not going to mention Whittaker because she's not really the doctor. So Eccleston, Eccleston at 12th place. Colin Baker at 11th. Then I had Paul McGann at 10th place. 9th place I had Patrick Troughton. I feel bad about that. Please don't have a go at me. Then I had where are we? 8th place, the 10th Doctor, David Tennant. 7th place was Sylvester McCoy, the 7th Doctor. 6th place was Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor. 5th place was Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor. 4th place, Peter Davison as the 4th Doctor. 3rd place, Bill Hartnell as the 1st Doctor. 2nd place, John Pertwee, the 3rd, and of course the King himself, Tom Baker, as the 1st Doctor. I don't really need to explain why he's number one; he just is.
Okay, so now, and feel free to chime in.
Oh, no, piss off! My show now, mine.
It's all right, Noel. I'm used to it.
Okay. Go on,
okay, yeah. So as I say, feel free to comment on any of my choices, just not for 20 minutes.
Well, I'll see about that. Just if you brought Noel on, this would go on for another 4 hours.
Okay. So coming in at number 13, ironically, it's number 13. And to be honest, because I hope to someday have my channel monetized, I'm not going to go too much in detail of why I don't like 13. I think Lee has summed everything up at the start of the video. I think I was open to a female doctor, and I was actually really, really excited for her era. Nothing about it whatsoever made me think this is Doctor Who. And I could go into all the politics, but I'm not going to.
It doesn't warrant any further discussion, frankly.
No, she's a bad doctor. I don't wish any ill will to the actress, although she has said some things that really annoy me and a lot of people, but I think we're just going to move swiftly on. So coming in at the very bottom, and this might be very cliche, but we have Colin Baker. So Colin Baker, I have said this previously on the stream, I think his first season, season 22, is an absolute masterpiece. I think it is one of the most underrated and overlooked seasons in the entire history of the show. And honestly, I think the biggest problem with that season is the Sixth Doctor himself, especially when he gets started. Now, although he was massively toned down from the Twin Dilemma, which of course he was also in at the end of season 21, I still think he could be a bit of an arse every now and then, and just quite disregarding people's feelings and even human life. Like, I think this is kind of the precursor to Jodie, but Jodie was far worse. Letting people drown in a pool of acid without giving a monkey's tail, and just being... However, I just think, his stories were fantastic. Attack of the Cybermen is my favorite 80s story. It's so adult. It's so gritty and dark.
Vengeance on Varos as well.
Vengeance on Varos,
Fantastic.
brilliant. The Two Doctors, bit of a waste of the Sontarans, but the whole cannibal alien androgums, like bloody hell. And of course, the Second Doctor, who does quite steal the show, I have to say. Sorry, Colin.
And with the wonderful Jack
Yeah. And Mark of the Rani.
He's been up and down like a horse draws on my list before.
Yeah.
He does go up and down. I haven't always had him that low down, but currently that's pretty. Yeah. Go on, sorry.
Mark of the Rani. Just making sure you'd finished your breath. Mark of the Rani, quite bland, to be honest, but that's probably because I haven't watched the story in a while. Revelation of the Daleks, probably the darkest story that has ever been broadcast in the history of the show. So yeah, a lot of great stories. Season 23 was a disaster. If you know the behind-the-scenes issues that were going on, then I don't blame Colin for this, but sadly, the poor characterization and the effect of what was going on was not enough to save his Doctor from being this low. So next up, we come in with Peter Davidson. And this might annoy some people, but I just find this Doctor to be quite bland, as do I find most of his stories. I don't really dislike him, and honestly, from this point onwards, I don't really dislike any Doctors. So it's really just Jodie that I hate and Colin that I think has issues. But from this point, I honestly like all of them. But as I say, for me, and as someone who's been watching all of the stories, I just find them to be quite bland, to the point where I think even poor Peter Davidson looks like he's falling asleep. Like he's getting fed up and that he just couldn't wait to get out. I think his story Caves of Androzani is a masterpiece, and that was, if only all of his stories were like that, he probably could have been in the top 3, to be honest. But yeah, very experimental time for the show, and I think poor Davidson just wasn't given the material he did. I do love his empathetic nature, especially towards even the evilest of creatures, and he did resist killing Davros, something which he later regretted, apparently. But, I think he showed that empathy is something that's very important and not just going in all guns blazing, which I think I do have a lot of respect for his Doctor for.
I think it was the most moral Doctor. I think he was the most affable and certainly the most caring. I think, especially sacrificing himself like he did at the end.
Yeah. And like I say, I do really like him as an actor, and I love his contributions to the show.
I think it's one of those Doctors you sort of had to sort of grown up with to really kind of
love him.
Yeah,
and what's interesting was I was speaking to someone just randomly about this, and she said, "I love Peter Davidson," and of course I raised an eyebrow, and I was like, "He's your favourite?" And she's like, "He's just the one I remember." And I think it's the same for everyone. It's your Doctor.
There's that Marie Claire, she does, she's been doing the whole, reactions to all the classic she hadn't watched before. And surprisingly, she didn't really take to Tom Baker, but she absolutely loved Peter Davidson's Doctor. I think her favourite is John Pertwee, though. But it's quite interesting. Yeah. Someone who's a younger fan, sort of discovering Doctor Who for the first time and putting Pertwee and Davison as a top Doctor is quite interesting.
Well, I did think they did work well together, actually. I think they balanced off each other quite well. But yeah, I put Davidson here mostly just, companions were a bit of a meh, and most of his stories were. And I think that's a shame, because a lot of potential. Very much the Matt Smith of Classic Who, I find. A lot of potential. Stories letting down.
Peter Davison made beige, cricket, and vegetables sexy again. So you can't argue with that, can you?
Oh yeah, there's probably an online group just dedicated to celery, I think, because of Peter Davidson. Okay, so coming in at number 10. Yeah, 10. We have
Daniel's going to kick off.
Yeah, it's all going to kick off now. I know Queen Charlotte and Melina and very, very a lot of people are going to slag me off big time. I really like Capaldi. I know you don't believe me because I put him this low on the list, but I really like Capaldi, and his Doctor saw me through one of the worst eras in the history of the program. Stephen Moffat should have been told, "Listen, Moffat, you clearly ain't got it anymore. Get out."
Move
But
over,
no,
Sonny.
he stuck around way too long, and his creativity just got worse and worse. And I can see Noel's lost it in the chat.
No! Shut up.
And
Shut
I
up, Noel.
think Capaldi just said, "Hold my beer. I'm going to keep your show going." And that's exactly what he did. When he came on the screen in Class, that god awful spin off, I forgot everyone else was there because he was just he just stole the screen. And
I think if it had another season, I think under a different showrunner, certainly not under Chibnall, mind you, but like, if it had been Stevens, was it, or whatever, anyone, literally anyone else other than Chibnall, mate, I think he could have really, like, he had some really stonking stories behind him. I imagine Capaldi with Robert Holmes or something. Jeez,
oh
that would have
god,
been incredible.
he is probably the most qualified actor to play the character in the new series, which only irritates me all the more that his era turned out the way he did. But here's something that Noel
And he's a
will
true
like.
fan.
Here's something that Noel will like me for. I do actually really like Series 10, which is
Okay, yeah.
something that I know. Sorry.
I like Series 10. Obviously, there's an awful lot of problems with that, but I loved him and Pearl Mackie. I
Yes.
loved him with Missy. I loved World Enough and Time. Like, okay, the sequel
Fantastic.
part to that wasn't great, but like the first part, World Enough and Time, absolutely phenomenal.
No,
I
look.
absolutely
Stephen Moffat, right, I know I slag you off. World Enough in Time was the best Doctor Who story since, well, in not only in the whole of Capaldi's era, but since, oh God, I would say since Russell's era. Like, for me, I was gobsmacked by how good that was. It's a shame part 2 didn't live up to it, but, you know, that's yeah. A lot of great
Dublin
stories.
said Series 10 is his favourite. There you go.
Yeah,
And
so
Channel
there you
doesn't hate
go.
you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Oh, thank you. So there you go. It's just one of those things, and I like a lot of his stories. I love Flatline and Mummy on the Orient Express. I love
Yeah.
Oxygen. I love Face the Raven is actually my favorite story from Series 9, not only because it kills Clara, but because it just genuinely is a very interesting and good story. And those stories are something that I like to watch back to back, you know, just like, right, tonight I just feel like watching my favorite Capaldi stories, and God, it's good. So to get off this now before the chat explodes, we are going to go into something that Queen Charlotte will unfollow me for. At number
Have these
9.
changed since we've been talking? Like, because you said you changed some around.
Yeah, but I feel like I have to stick with my guts, you know,
Okay.
and if we ever do an update, then I'll update it. But yeah, Matt Smith is just like Capaldi, was a very missed opportunity. I have come to appreciate him more and more as time has gone on, especially, you know, looking back at it. I love his youthfulness. I love his kind of, you know, I love, I don't want this to sound weird, but I love how the kids are drawn to him. Like, he's this almost this Santa Claus character, you
Yeah, it's a
know.
bit magical, isn't he?
There's something about him, and like I say, should I really be putting him here? It's the stories. It's the stories. Much like Capaldi, they are few and far between. I'd say there are definitely more good ones, and they are more consistent. Like, you know, it's not like bad, 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 good, and the rest are bad. It's good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. You know, it's
Hell, I
very much
even
up and
liked
down.
Belgium and John. I did like that story. I have to say.
Oh, I
I'm
thought
not
that
afraid.
was a load of. I thought that was a pile of shit. But there you go.
I'm not afraid to say it.
It's
Okay,
all,
let it
it's all right.
go.
Particular highlights for me were The Crimson Horror, Mark Gattis's best script next to Unquiet Dead.
Yeah, I like that one as well. A lot
For
of people
me,
don't.
I love the Crimson Horror. It's just brilliant. You know, how do you it's gone back to the good old days of killing a bad guy was just shooting them off the edge of a building instead of, just talking them to death.
Bit of gothic
Absolute
horror. Love it.
yeah. Really, think Day of the Doctor is massively overrated. Just gonna say it is, and all you people who say Day of the Doctor is the best Doctor Who story ever made should honestly leave this fandom and never ever come back.
Get out of here, people.
I'm joking. I don't own the fandom like some people think they do.
Yeah.
But I actually love Time of the Doctor. I'm
Mhm.
just gonna say it. I thought it was very sweet. I thought it was a nice end. Moffat actually bothered to close off a storyline. It took him 3 seasons, but he did it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought really
Shut
great
up, Jack.
story.
Not Jack.
Oh,
Shut up, Daniel. Daniel, shut up.
look, I all people can have oh, I see what he's saying now.
Yeah, right. Now you see.
Oh, well, yeah. You
You're in
see,
trouble.
it is difficult, Daniel, it is, especially when you have a quiet voice like me.
Wow. Wow.
Um,
I'm not as bad as Noel, though.
you're as bad as each other. So,
No, no, it's not possible.
so back on topic. So,
Yes.
yeah, his best season was series 5. As many problems as I have with it, I did think it was the weakest season at the time, and I still see many problems with it. So once again, all you people who say it's the best series in New Who can just jolly well get the hell out of this fandom. No, I'm joking. Yeah, so I just don't really have much else to say. I think he is a brilliant doctor. I think he's grown on me over time, and I
Mm.
think he'll continue to grow on me over time. If they announced he was coming back, I would be excited for it. But
Mm.
unfortunately, there are just doctors that I consider to be better than him.
Fair
So
enough.
let's move on to something which I know is going to annoy a lot of people. Paul McGann. Now, you're probably thinking, how can you put a doctor who has only had, like 2 appearances in the show's history? Well, those 2 appearances were absolutely phenomenal. And yes, I'm one of those weirdos that actually likes the TV movie. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say it. I find it quite enjoyable to watch. I know it kind of messes with canon a little bit, but I think as its own thing,
Not as much as recently, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, that is that. But I think as its own thing, as something you can sit down and watch, I think it's very good. I love the opening theme. In fact, it's my favorite opening theme in the whole show. I love McGann. He is just absolutely brilliant. And yeah, I just think it's very good, really. And it leaves a lot to be desired. And I think him coming back in the anniversary was just such a tease. It was such a tease. It was almost like Moffat was rubbing salt in the wound, especially by only making it like
I'll
30
never
minutes long.
understand why he wasn't in the 50th proper. Like,
Oh, well, in the words of Moffat, I couldn't picture him being in the 50th. I just couldn't picture him in the Time War. You know what I mean? No, I don't know what you mean, Moffat. Sometimes I wake up and I forget the show's even back. Yeah, that hasn't aged well, has it? Yeah,
oh,
if you can't
oh,
tell, I'm not very fond of Moffat, but there you go. It's okay.
well,
It's not fine.
at the
Uh,
moment, I prefer him to RTD currently, just on the Instagrams alone. But anyway,
yeah. I don't hate you, Moffat. I gladly have your autograph and get you to sign it. Forget the show's even back. I'd love you to sign an autograph with that on it. But no, no, love you really, mate. So yeah, McGann just leaves so much to be desired, and I really want to track down the Eighth Doctor comics because I heard they were brilliant. They've got these really cool looking Cybermen and everything. I just want more of him. And even if I do have to listen to some CDs with my incredibly short attention span, then I will do my best to do so.
I
Because
tend to find the best time to listen to those is when you've got nothing else to do and you're ready to go to bed, but you're not tired enough. So you
yeah,
just put it on and then you just lie there and listen, and
no, but that's the trouble. I'll fall asleep before the ending.
Yeah, I do that all the time. But then, I go back to where I remember leaving off when I fell asleep, and then just the next day going from there.
Yeah, that is a
Get through
very
it
good
eventually.
idea. Right, so moving swiftly on, who have we got? Now, one that might upset people a little bit. So coming in next at, what number are we? 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Coming in at number 7, we have the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton.
Mine.
Yep, I think so, yeah. We were quite the same in that regard. So, yes, now, I love Troughton as an actor. I love him as the Doctor. And I think his good stories are absolutely phenomenal. Tomb of the Cybermen is one of the best Doctor Who stories ever made. Debate me. And I just think that his character is beautiful. I think his speeches, he just had a way. And Tomb of the Cybermen again, love that speech where it's just him and Victoria. Everyone else has nodded off. It's just him and Victoria, and that chemistry. That when her dad dies and she's all upset about it, it's like, oh yes, but the memory you have won't always be a sad one. And then of course you get that very famous speech, "Our lives are different to everybody else's.
Notice,
No one in the
notice he didn't
universe can
go.
do what we're doing."
Notice he didn't go. Well, I'm feeling socially
Oh, I'm
awkward. I'm just
socially
gonna
awkward. I probably should say something about now, shouldn't I? But I don't
go.
want to, because you're
No,
horrible.
he knew what to say and how to say it exactly. That like a hero.
Can you imagine if Jodie was in this scene?
Hey, Victoria, will you stop mourning about your dead dad?
Let's go and scissor. I fancy ya.
Lee, no, not on this channel. No, you're not getting away with language like that.
Well, actually, Rabbi got into trouble for mentioning anything to do with Victoria.
Yeah. Oh no, look, Lee, what have I said?
What?
Anyway, so yeah, the second Doctor had absolutely fantastic stories, but he also had a lot of duds. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
He had a
lot
lot of
of ones
duds.
that dragged. It's 8-parters
Yeah.
and 10-parters like that.
And I know Noel's going to get upset with me for this, but The Invasion was one of the worst stories I've ever seen in the history of the show.
Just be like the Protector, that'll be all right.
Yeah. It just is. I'm just going to put it that way. So, yeah, as we know, his era had a lot of issues, but towards the end especially. But I don't think anyone can deny that this Doctor was loved. And I think just the many times that he came back into the show was proof of that.
Every time he came back.
So moving on now to, what number was I on? Number 6. We have...
Well, Jack's accent was decent. There you go. There's from a Scot there.
We have number 9. Drastically different from where you put him. And I think, for me, it's just because this was the perfect reintroduction to the character for a new generation. I think it brought a lot of mystery into the character. And I'm one of those people, it could just be because I'm an RTD fanboy, but I am one of those people that does really like the Time War kind of thing. I think it gives us something it gives us something new without compromising what went before, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Eccleston did a fantastic job, no pun intended, with what he had.
Yeah.
I think he obviously had his misgivings about the show, and that's why he walked off the way he did, which annoyed a lot of people, and I can understand that. But for me, he was the perfect start to what is, in my opinion, a perfect era, and his goodbye scene at the end was just, it brings a tear to me every time. Just, you were fantastic, and you know what? So was I, and just, I love it, the music and everything, but I think he's really good, and I think, he is at the top of a lot of people's Doctors lists, and, for someone who only did 1 season, that's pretty impressive. I will
Baker
agree.
above him.
Oh yeah, no, that's
I think a lot of
actually
it
quite
also,
insane.
I'm quite coloured by his incessant nonsense, but I don't really put it down to that so much. But I think it's, I just expected more from a Doctor. He had a bit of a Tom Baker feel about him in his looks wise, but his sort of aquiline nose, but it was just too many Starring elements for me. I think that's really
Yeah.
where it fell short.
But yeah, so I agree with you in the sense that the leather jacket might have been a bit too bland, but at the
Too
same
understated.
time, I do think it was a nice way to reintroduce the character.
I think it's selling out the character. To be honest, I think it was just they could have gone bold and it would have been accepted just as much. I really do think.
Okay, so if you think Lee's annoyed now, just you wait till you see my next Doctor.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts. That hurts a lot.
I think that Tom Baker is the most overrated Doctor in the show.
Ow! Ow!
I'm loving this. I'm loving it. I'm loving every
Well, it's been
second.
nice
of doing
chatting
it.
to you, Jack, and
Yeah,
it's been a
yeah.
pleasure
That's,
knowing
might actually be able to speak now. Yeah.
you.
Sorry.
Oh,
But right, just let me speak. God
I
damn
don't
it.
know if I want to. Go on.
Okay. So I appreciate Tom Baker as being the most iconic Doctor in the show. I appreciate that Tom Baker brought freshness to the show. And I appreciate that Tom Baker was in some of the best stories in the history of the show, some of which were back to back. Like, you know, you've got Deadly Assassin, Robots of Death, and Talons of Wen-Chiang, Horror of Fang Rock back to back. In a marathon, it's just the best day of your life. However, I don't know, but there is a thing with me when I watch Tom Baker stories, I can't watch too many of them at once. I don't know what it is. And sometimes I think his character can be borderline sociopath at some point. I know
That's what I
some
liked.
people I know this is the thing. Some people love it. Some people absolutely love that. He's just absolutely insane. He's sociopathic. He's funny. I'm deeply regretting this now because I'm looking at the comments.
There's going to be tiki torches lighting all over the country today.
I can already smell the smoke. Like,
Yeah, they're coming for you.
but I do like him. I've made this abundantly clear that aside from 13 and 6, I love all of these Doctors. So give me a break. You know, I'm putting them all
Ooh,
pretty much next to each other. There are just some things about this Doctor that I don't like. Okay, but there are so many things that I love as well. And if there weren't so many things that I loved about the Doctors ahead of him, he would be higher on this list. Does that make sense?
no. Yeah, look, I get it. You know, I think a lot of it's a generational thing. It's like Marie Claire, for example. You know, I love her channel. She's doing Blake Seven now, bless her. And Tom Baker just didn't really take to him as much either. You know, I think he was a zeitgeist for the time. You know, he's timeless because he's so classic, because he was there for so long, for so much of our lives, and embodied the character so deeply. And as you say, I don't like the word iconic. Actually, it's so overused, but
Yeah.
in this case, it's absolutely spot on.
I will say, in my most recent watching, I love the banter between him and Romana. I think Romana was his best companion. Hands down.
Romana was my first. Well, Romana 2 was my first companion that I remember anyway. And yeah, I think there was definitely, because you know, those two were flirting like nobody's business at the time, but certainly, you know, the first season.
Lee, Daniel's enjoying your pain.
Well, that's nice. That's nice.
I was
Well, at least he
expecting
ranked
you
higher
to.
than Hardy.
No way! I was expecting you to do your trademark. No.
No.
That's it. As soon as he came on screen.
No.
Oh, this is going to make you do it. This is going to make you do it even more. So the next, what number am I at? 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Okay, so coming in at number 4, we have the 7th Doctor.
So you put him above Tom Baker? Okay.
I do.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I get it.
Okay, and that is because I am a huge fanboy of his era. And I don't know what it is. I just love watching it. Aside from his first season, that can go take a running jump in a lake. Except for Delta and the Bannerman. I do love Delta and the Bannerman.
Oh
Paradise
my
Towers.
God.
No, I love it. Paradise
God.
Towers, however, is the
Okay.
worst piece of television that has ever been broadcast. Blue Kang, Red Kang. All of you just go be Black Kangs or Purple Kangs or just get off the screen. Like it's so bad. But anyway, so it has a very nice style to it, very 80s. Love the music. A lot of people hate it. I actually love it. Remembrance of the Daleks is the best Dalek story in Classic Who. Fight me.
No,
How
you're a
can you-
lying piece of crap. I have a soft spot for this Doctor. No, you don't. You couldn't stand it. Remember when Ghostlight was on and Galaxy, the Greatest Show in the Galaxy? You couldn't handle it.
I love Greatest Show in the Galaxy. It has become, it's honestly gone into my top 10. I was not expecting to like it that much.
The thing I
Silver
love
Nemesis.
about his sorry, I'm just going to talk over you like an arsehole again. I was just going to say what I liked about Sylvester's era was it was much more like the comic books, which were quite mental.
Yeah.
It was kind of a bit comic book.
But I love Andrew Cartnell's style. And you know, what I love about Remembrance and why I think it's honestly one of the best stories ever. You've got scenes like the cafe scene. How beautiful is that scene? It is just two guys talking at a bar. Obviously, one of them is the Doctor. And it just manages to hold you. Such a simple conversation, and it just makes me smile every time. I love the simple things like, Harry, toast, oh, coming. And he says that like 4 times. And it's just
and
like,
the great thing about that story as well, I had the sexiest neo-Nazi I've ever seen. The guy,
yeah,
that
Lee.
is a similar space.
Oh my
It was hard.
Yeah, sorry, I keep forgetting. I was thinking of a woman. How rude of me.
Oh my God,
sorry.
that's so heteronormative.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missexualized you. But yeah, I like Silver Nemesis. Okay, Lee. So I want you to count to 5 because the chat's about to explode. I like Silver Nemesis. 5,
What else?
4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, this is painful.
People are typing. I like Silver Nemesis. Do you know there was one? I had a really bad day 2 years ago, and I just put Silver Nemesis on, and by the end of it, I was happy. I was smiling. I didn't know what I just watched, but I was smiling. You know, there's something so great about just neo-Nazis versus Cybermen. It works for me. And of course, David Banks, you know, you can't top him. Eradicate them. You know, it's brilliant.
There you go. Daniel said McCoy is my fave classic Doctor. Curse of Fenric is
Daniel, mate, thank you. See, he gets it. Battlefield, it's a story from when I was a kid. It has the best looking monster in Classic Who. The Destroyer looks incredible. And it's a bit silly. I didn't enjoy it as much on my most recent watch, but it has like a personal spot to me. Curse of Fenric and Survival, best way the show could have gone out. It's absolutely fantastic. Love the music, the direction, the gothic horror. It makes me wish we'd got season 27. That's all I'm saying. Makes me wish. How dare the BBC cancel the show when it on a high like it was?
And when they allow this current shit to run on for as long as it has.
Yeah.
and Gaslight is telling us it's amazing and the best as ever when it clearly isn't. It's
hypocrisy.
Just a joke. And it's doing worse than Sylvester's era. Like, really? Come on.
Yeah, Sylvester's era didn't deserve to suck. It's just everyone in fandom was a bunch of sheep that believed everything the media told them. Oh, yeah, these people say it's bad, so I think it's bad. Spider-Man 3, people say it's bad, so I think it's bad. Yeah, shut up and get out. Just kidding. Okay, so coming in at number 3.
I love about you there, Jack. You're very understated.
This will make people put ice on their heads and chill out. No, wrong one.
Ooh.
No, yeah. Number 3. William Hartnell.
Me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We do have common ground.
We have a match, folks. We have a match.
I sat down during the start of lockdown, the time when I think we all needed something to stop us from. Well, no, I won't say that because that's going a bit far. But
Going
it
round
was
the
a
bend.
it was a very difficult time. I sat down and I watched the entire Hartnell era, and I fell in love. Not with Hartnell. But,
Why wouldn't you?
I fell in love with just this wonderful family show from a bygone era. Ian and Barbara are the best companions in the show's history. Fight me. Because they really are. Like, you want to talk about strong women, look no further than Barbara Wright. The Daleks, the Aztecs, the Space Museum, the Sensorites, the Time Meddler, the Ark. Honestly, just sensational. And I think this era has aged like a fine wine. So many people will disagree with me.
Well,
But
they're idiots.
no, but here's the thing, like, a lot of people like, it's too old, it's black and white. You're missing out. I'm sorry, you are missing out. And a lot of people probably look at me and they think, oh, well, he doesn't understand because he's one of the new Who, like, he doesn't understand. I love the Hartnell era, and I don't need people like you to say that I can't love it even though I'm of the younger generation,
Quite
that
right.
I'll never understand it. I love this era. It's innocent, it's pure. It does have some bad stuff in there, some bad
Clunkers.
effects. I personally love Planet of Giants. A lot of people think that's boring.
No,
I love it.
I like that story. Yeah, it's
I
very
like
clever
it.
as well. Yeah,
And
that was
Night
supposed to be the
Daniel,
original first story, wasn't it?
yeah, Night Daniel, thanks for coming.
Night Ledge.
Sorry, we're going on too long. It's Lee's fault.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, just really good era, and it's such a shame that so much is missing because it might even end up being higher if more stories get found or we get an animating team that can actually animate.
Yeah, I'd love to see like Marco Polo, the Celestial Toymaker, in its
Yeah, I heard that
entirety.
one's really good from people who've listened to the
Yeah,
audio.
yeah. Telesnaps are quite. It's hard enough with the black and white era, I find. I'm not a younger fan. Been around. I've
Well,
seen lots of black and white things, but
I will
I still
say,
find black and white difficult.
the telesnap reconstruction that they did for Galaxy 4, which is on the Aztec Special Edition DVD, was brilliant. It was watchable. So much so that I'm not even going to bother picking up the animation
Mm.
because it's watchable and the story is actually cut slightly shorter. So everyone who said that the animated version went on too long and it was boring, I don't have that problem because I watch a better version on the Aztec Special Edition DVD. So go check that out.
Well, I used to listen to Genesis of the Daleks on cassette tape. When it came out on cassette tape before it was out on video, and it's fine as an audio. You can actually listen to these stories without actually having the visual input necessarily. It does work.
Mm. Yeah,
I mean,
no,
Big Finish made a career out of it.
and I love Hartnell himself. He's so
It's really
wonderful. He
the
starts off as a
best.
bit of a hateful git, but he mellows into the soft-hearted grandfather that everyone needs. Just look how he is with Vicky. He loves
It's when
Vicky.
he grabs his lapel and he sort of stands with his chin up and his eyes are darting around the room and he's
Yeah,
clearly thinking several moves ahead. Love that. Absolutely love that.
I might even dedicate a whole video to Hartnell at some point.
Absolutely.
I really just like him that much. So you
Yep.
might be wondering,
Same.
well, why is he coming in at number 3? Well, that is because the hardest decision I have ever had to make is coming in at number 2 and number 1. So coming in at number 2, we have the Third Doctor.
Same as
Now,
me.
if you were to say to me, who is the definitive classic Doctor? It has to be Pertwee.
I understand that.
It is breaking my heart because of everything that's gone on with the show. I am struggling to enjoy it. I am struggling to sit and watch it. So I've been watching his era and I haven't been enjoying it as much as I wanted to. And I think it's just because I'm going through a bit of a patch at the moment. But I sat down and I watched Colony in Space and I hated that story. when I first watched it. Couldn't stand it. I absolutely loved it when I watched it 2 weeks ago. Genuinely.
I like the
the Draconians, that's Frontier in Space.
Sorry, I was just
The miners.
Sorry. The mine. So my brain is frying out. But Tom Baker may be my absolute all-time favorite Doctor because he was my first, and he's just so unique, I think, amongst all of them, as is John Pertwee. But as I said, when I put John Pertwee as my second choice, it's because he's so close between him and Tom Baker. There's not much. So I think the thing that tips Tom Baker for me above John Pertwee is just his style and humor, his oddballness, his more alienness that I like. And I thought John Pertwee could be a bit too austere, and Tom Baker could just release that valve a bit with a quip.
Yeah,
I like
Sudoku 24. I love the Green Death. That's my favorite story. It's a perfect example of how to be political and make it so good. Do you know what? If all hippies were like those people in the Green Death, I would actually love them.
Rather than wish them a lobotomy. Yeah.
No, I don't wish that upon anyone, but yeah, I get what you mean.
Metaphorically.
They're so likable and they're portrayed so well. And Jo Grant, she's the most loveliest companion ever. Nicholas Courtney, he will always be the best side character in the show. Roger Delgado is my favourite master, which some of you might be surprised about, but yeah, he is. I love him so much, even though he may have been a bit overused. Just every time he's on screen, you can't help but just really.
Thank God he was, because what happened to him. Thank God
it was
he had so much.
So
John Ono was a great story, and that's another classic. I mean, not the greatest companion. A lot of people might agree with that, but I still think that's my brain's gone again. But I still think that was probably one of his greatest stories. That and the Green Death, I think, definitely up there.
I think for me, it would probably be a three-way tie between Inferno, the Green Death, and the Time Warrior.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And Mind of Evil is pretty great, and Day of the Daleks, best Dalek story of the 70s. Oh, I know I'm going to get some hate for that. Genesis of the Daleks is a Davros story. The Daleks are barely in it. I'm talking about just Daleks. Just Daleks. Day of the Daleks is leaps and bounds ahead of everything else.
I think that's a very interesting point.
I'm just saying.
Genesis of the Daleks, very much, I would agree. It's not a Dalek story. It's very much a Davros story.
Fantastic story, but it's not a Dalek story.
I can see that. I can agree with that, actually.
So, yeah, Pertwee is absolutely fantastic. I love him. I love just how masculine he is. You will never see this kind of Doctor again. I'm sorry, you won't. He tells it as it is. He will tell anyone to shut up who is talking nonsense. And I love in Spearhead when he just goes, yes, well, I suppose you want to see my past. Yes, well, I haven't got one. And you just tell Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart that I want to see him. Well, don't just stand there gawping, man. Get to it. And he can't say anything. He can't. And it's so brilliant.
And no matter how close Capaldi got to sort of becoming a sort of a modern day mirror to that Doctor, particularly, he
doesn't have that energy.
Yeah, the gravitas isn't there. Like authority of this character of the Third Doctor, and he is, as you say, he's a very masculine role, and Capaldi just is really sort of not an imitation, but he's derivative of
which wasn't his fault. It was the climate at the time, as we both know.
I don't know if I think he deliberately mimicked in a way, or certainly took elements of Pertwee particularly. But you say we'll never see the likes of him again. I think Capaldi was trying very much to be very much in that. I just don't think anyone can really pull it off, other than John. I hope one day we'll see another Doctor like John Pertwee. I
But
really
when I see things like the announcement of the new Doctor, and when I see, you know, all these things,
Mm.
I just look at Pertwee and I go, it's not the same character.
I know, that's how I feel.
Pertwee is my standard.
Mm.
Pertwee is the only reason he's at number 2 is what I will mention when I get to number 1, and I think
Mm.
everyone who's a Doctor Who fan will agree with that point. But Pertwee, I just love him, and I wish I could have met him so much. But hey, because we are going way over the time that we set, I'm gonna get on to my number 1. And like you say, I think you sung Pertwee's praises as well when you did your
Absolutely.
list. So lastly, and those of you who've spoken to me before, you've had me on your streams, you will know who my number 1 is. It is, yep, I've said it.
Himself.
I'm a Tennant. I am one of those irritating younger generations that don't understand the show. Oh, they just fap over Tennant, and it's just like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He is my Doctor.
That's
He
it.
will always be my Doctor. When I think of Doctor Who, when that word comes into my head, I do think of Pertwee and I do think of Baker, even though I put him way down there. I do. I do think of McCoy. I do think of McGann, and I do think of Capaldi.
Jodie Whittaker.
No, I don't.
Only when like flames appear in my eyes and
Look, I'm going to stop calling her Jodie Whittaker because I honestly have no hostility towards the actress. I've never met her, so I don't know her. It's I know she said some stupid things, but it's like,
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, Tennant is what comes to mind. His stories, his adventures, his music, the Murray Gold theme, the RTD era, it just the reasons why I need RTD's next upcoming era to be so good is because if it ends up like just a Chris Chibnall era Mark II, it will take this away from me. And I can't. If Tennant goes in the bin, it all goes in the bin. And I hate to say that, like that. This is where I'm at, you know. But anyway, I'm digressing, and this is for a whole nother video. But for me, Tennant just embodied the role for a whole generation. You know, much like Pertwee and Baker embodied the role for your generation. And I know it's easy to say like, oh well, this generation sucks. Like all you Gen Zs and your technology and your TikTok and your 70 million plus genders and your pumpkin spice lattes and your oity toity up your doity and pardon me for living. You know, all your just everything all you people say when you're in the pub.
You're right there, Jack.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Jesus, you're having a meltdown. you sound like a Gen Zer right now. No, Gen Xer.
Well, how can you blame me from listening to you lot for 4 years? Like,
we can't help being right, can we?
No, it's just I see a lot of the problems, and watching Classic Who, I understand why there's a lot of resentment to the new Who, and it is just my original era, and I don't think it ever will be topped.
No one should take that away from you, and
No,
no one should take away the classic for us, you know. And I think that's where a lot of the resentment comes from. Is like how Chibnall, particularly, has tried to steal that from us, you know, by undermining the classic era. So that was obviously this predates that. I totally understand it. You know, this is the definitive Doctor for this generation. You know.
Can I just say, with what Chibnall did, I think he undermines this as well. You know, I don't think it's this kind of, and even Matt Smith and Capaldi. You know, I don't think it is this. I don't think this iteration of the show was ever at war with the previous iteration. I think it just tried to do something new to capture a new audience. And whether if they had have done Classic Who Mark II, if that would have been just successful, we'll never know. But this is what we got, and this is what I fell in love with.
It made Doctor Who a worldwide brand. It made it a force. It became everywhere. I mean, you just need to look at Toyland to see how popular it was. And it was as if this is how we wanted Doctor Who to be when we were growing up. We wanted it to be toys and everything. I mean, you look at the toys from our time. When I was at high school, like the only toys we had were the Dapol figures, and God, the state of that. And we look at Yora, and I think in sort of abject jealousy, really. Like, we've had all this then.
I'll never forget. I can't remember what it was, if it was my birthday or if I was just good, but my mom took me into Toys R Us, and of course they had that massive display.
That awful thing.
Pick some figures. And at this point, the only Doctor Who figures I had were the Cult of Skaro set. So I had 4 Daleks and the Genesis Ark, and I loved it. So I was going to get more, and I got the Cyber Controller Throne set, which was the Cyber Controller on his chair with 2 guards. I got the Impossible Planet set, which was the capsule that they lower down into the pit, with the Doctor in the orange spacesuit, 2 Oods, and a possessed Toby Z. A lot of figures, and I got the Jadoon Captain as a individual thing, and those memories of me playing at the top of the stairs, just creating my own little Doctor Who adventures.
Brilliant.
I wish I could get that back, and this is what I really must sit down and watch this era, because I'm trying to do everything chronological, and I'm still on the Pertwee era, so it's going to take me quite a long time.
I only had a tin, a tin of the TARDIS with Tom Baker sticking out the door. And that's the only toys we had, really. There wasn't much in the way of toys. We had annuals and whatnot, and comic, the Doctor Who Weekly. But that was it. I'm so jealous, but at the same time so happy for the new generation of fans who had all that, because it's something I wish I had had as a kid. And I think it was wonderful to see Doctor Who loved and adored in the same way that I loved and adored it, but they clearly having much more of a whale of a time with it, because they had all these wonderful things that we didn't have, and it's great to see.
But the really misleading thing is a lot of the fans that were just the same as me during this era, this generation, have gone. And I think it's a common misconception that, it's the fans that came in about this time that are still with it. And I just think that's not true. I talked to so many people at university, and I just say, I loved it when it was like Eccleston, Tennant, and we constantly rewatch it. We've got the DVDs, we go back and we marathon it, and we just love it. And it just never seemed to rise as high as it was in the public psyche than this era. And we can sit here for hours debating whether or not, I like to look at it as, you got Classic Who, you got the TV movie, and then you got this nice little, 5 years of the Russell T Davies era on the end. And I can celebrate it being its own thing, whether you choose to consider it canon or not. I can celebrate it as just its own unique thing. And that, like I say, Tennant is, to sum it up, Tennant is my Doctor, and he will always be my Doctor. And meeting him April this year and giving a chance to give him a drawing was just the greatest thing ever.
Better than my encounter with my top Doctor. But I find it interesting that our second and third places are the same. And we both put our favourite Doctors first, obviously, but each other's favourite Doctors lower down. That's interesting as well.
Yeah. So there is a contrast, isn't there?
There's a contrast, but also a similarity as well. The top tier, well, the second and third place, because obviously we've got Pertwee and Hartnell right next to each other. It's quite interesting.
So there we have it. So just to summarise, at the bottom for me, it was 13. May as well get the image. So yeah, at the bottom we have 13, and then we have Colin, then Peter, then Capaldi, which I know upsets a lot of people, then Matt, and then McGann, then Troughton, then Eccleston. Here we go, and then Tom, and then
I put Tennant much lower than you put Tom Baker. So
yeah, fair enough. And then Sylvester, then Hartnell, then Pertwee, and it was so difficult to make this decision. And then last but ever so not least, Tennant. So that is my ranking. And yeah, I think despite our differences, I actually think we are very similar, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's no denying sort of lower tier, really. I think usually I would put the classic Doctors head and shoulders above the New Who era, but I did make allowances. Because I have to base it on really sort of what I gleaned from it. It's not easy for me even to put Colin Baker lower than New Who Doctors. Feels a bit of a betrayal, but really I have to give credit to their performances and how they managed to pique my interest. Particularly with Matt Smith and Capaldi. In an era of terrible writing, quite honestly, but even though Tennant had much better stories, I just felt he was, for me, just a bit too human, and it was a bit too soapy, I thought, with the whole Rose thing. Yeah. And that did leave her thing, but I totally get how latched to him that younger fans of he was their first Doctor, or they grew up, or certainly the most impressioned, left the most impression on them. He's the most popular Doctor of the current era, and one of the most popular of all, if not the most popular. But certainly Tom Baker for my generation, for the classic Who fans, and Pertwee as well, definitely the same thing. They were the most popular at the time. They were getting up to like 18 million views or something crazy. It was a golden era, and Tennant presided over a sort of renaissance, Doctor Who, new second golden era wave, and that shouldn't be understated. I think whether or not personally older fans agree with that, I think you have to put it in context of the times that we were most impressed upon by our Doctors. And I think that it's hard to shake that, that early mark on your personality growing up. It's so indelible. And Tom Baker, for me, was, and John Pertwee. I think John Pertwee to a slightly lesser extent, and even bearing in mind, Tom Baker was my first Doctor, and he was the one that, left an indelible mark on me as a very young child. And it was only really until I was at high school in my Doctor Who club at school that I was introduced properly to John Pertwee. But it goes to show how strong a Doctor he was later on, after Peter Davison, sort of growing up with Peter Davison as well, and then Colin, and then Sylvester, and then sort of just beginning to delve into the older Doctors. And certainly Pertwee left a absolutely powerful mark. He's right up there. He's superfluous. Not superfluous. About. No, he's what else? Not superfluous. Totally the wrong. But like he was totally immersive. His run was like you believed he was the Doctor. You believed he was on another planet. However ridiculous the monsters were, or whatever, he believed it, and that's what mattered. You believed it.
Well, like I say, if you were to say favourite classic Who Doctor, Pertwee, favourite New Who Doctor, Tennant, and that's just how it is for me. So I think we're going to wrap up here because we've gone like 40 minutes over the time that I was hoping we'd finished. Yeah. So I hope that those of you in the chat have actually been able to keep following through this.
Superlatives. Thank you, Sadaka. That's I am sweating my ass off here. It's just so hot.
Oh no, it is ridiculous. I need to like
Yeah.
chill out after this. So, thank you for all those of you who've tuned in for this stream. If you're still there, and yeah, just I hope you guys enjoyed. And I know there might be some of you who were a bit upset by where me or Lee placed some of the doctors, but at the end of the day, guys, you've just got to be honest. Like, don't like something because people say you should like it, and don't hate something because everyone else is hating it.
Yeah.
You've always just got to be true to yourself, and I think that's what this whole ranking was about. So yeah, and so yeah,
Being
thanks for
individual.
yeah, that's important. So, thanks, Lee, for your input and the large abundance of it that you gave.
I don't know how long we were going to go for.
I was intending this to be an hour, but that seems impossible with these people. So, thank you ever so much for watching, guys, and thank you all of you in the comments for coming in, joining, commenting, and yeah, just giving me reason to keep doing this channel. I really do love and appreciate all of you. I appreciate that not all of you watching, like my toy viewers, might like this, but this is just a little thing that I like to do on the side. But yeah, for all those of you, for Noel, the TARDIS Zone, and Sudoku, and yeah, and Daniel, and everyone else who was in there, just thanks so much for watching, and I will see you all on the next episode of JackRabbit Podcasts.
Bye.
So, yeah, bye everyone.